Oh, dear.
There we go. And we're live. And a very good evening, everybody, to our Lyceum night. We are a day earlier this week because tomorrow we will be heading back from the open day at Stansted after a very, very early start. So probably we'll all be very fast asleep on the way back from Stansted. Lovely Mark is coming over. He's going to be staying over here, so he's on site ready for tomorrow. Hello, Mark.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Or good day, everyone.
He's gone back home. He's just grabbed a bite to eat after work, and then he'll be heading over. The wine's in the fridge, so that's all lovely. And the cider. So, we haven't really got an agenda for tonight. You haven't really got a discussion point. One of the things I did think about was the value of education in spiritualism. Uh-huh. You know, so often it's pushed on the learn to be this and learn to be that, learn to do this and learn to do that. But what about the actual, you know, the developing, it's very close to my heart this year, but the development of the person. What's your thoughts?
Absolutely. Mark? I think it's one of those things people, as you say, look at the practicality, the practical development side, how to do a reading, how to read, or as how to. But the personal development and also the knowledge and education is really quite vital because, again, people might say, oh, well, I just want to do whatever spirit wants. But we have a wealth of information in our movement that's been brought through from spirit to educate us, to help us understand. We also, I think, as spiritual workers, whether we're doing healing, whether we're doing mediumship, whatever it may be, I think there's a great need to understand more about the self, the emotions, the mind, so that we don't misunderstand some of the spiritual experiences that we sometimes place on the discarnate world, when in fact it's something to do with our own psyche, our own understanding. Mm. And for absolutely for sure, we are here living life. And living life, regardless of whether we've got a connection to Auntie Doris or whoever in the spirit world, living life is something that we have to learn to navigate. And I think a spiritual understanding of life is kind of vital for all of us, whether or not we're working in spiritual fields or not.
Indeed. Just very quickly, quick hello, Jan Wallace from France. Hiya, Jamie Williamson.
Hi, Jane.
And lovely Matt will be at the college tomorrow.
Yeah, great. Fantastic.
So we're meeting by the bar. It's his round. But yeah, that is so true. And this is something that's really come to my attention over the past few months is we are so quick to put all the onus on the spirit world. The spirit world want you to do this, or the spirit world did that. And I'm like, no. I'll give you a prime example of what is achievable. And it may seem very small, very not impactful to a lot of people. This Sunday, the curse of the coach trip weekend. I didn't ask you deliberately because I did this in the last 2 years, and I thought I can't ask him again. So I'll be doing the service here, but of course I need a chairperson. Uh-huh. And there's somebody in the circle, and I thought of them, and I thought they're ready. And I contacted them, and I spoke to them last night, and they are up to doing it. Now, a year and a half ago, no.
Yeah.
No. Flat no. Wouldn't even say prayers. No. No. Not doing it. No. But here they are now through this pathway that they're walking. And it was very touching, actually, because I said, well, if you think I'm ready for it, then I'm ready for it. And I'm like,
perfect.
Okay. Okay, I'll take that. But this is what I'm trying to get over to people and try and emphasize. You know what? I keep trying to rub a mark off of the screen. It's that bloody light there. It looks like a spider on the screen.
It's coming in like this.
I keep looking at it going, "Ooh, what's that?" But yeah, this is the thing. We don't. For far too long, we focus on the mechanics. How to make a link, how to deliver a message, how to dispense, and not. We've left ourselves out of it.
Yeah, there's a lovely in one of Ursula Roberts' books, and I can't remember which one it is, so you have to forgive me for not naming the book. Part of it talks about the development of self, and it's got this beautiful illustration of a rose bush and all the different virtues and qualities that we should aspire to develop on the pathway of spirituality. And if I find it, I will share it with Lawrence, and he can share it to on the page somewhere or somewhere on this video for people. And what I think is interesting is, again, it's about the aspiration of an individual as to why they're coming into the fields of spirituality. What are they searching for? And again, as we all know, that sometimes people are brought into the movement because of some form of tragedy or difficulty, or they're searching for answers. But again, depending on what's in place or who's in place at the churches or centres they may visit, depends on whether they know there's more than just the demonstration. One of my things, as many people know, is my love of books. And, I have so many books I can't tell you. We're talking in thousands. I've always laughed and joked and said, when I die, I'm just going to decide in that moment just before who I like or don't like, who I'm going to send a truckload of books to. They'll either love me or loathe me as a result. But we have in our churches, in a lot of our churches that are lucky enough to have libraries, we have loads of wonderful books on spiritualism. But I know in so many churches that nobody ever advertises it or mentions it or talks about them. And they kind of
sit there. Both sets of grandparents with you to sign you into the library.
But I've always said to people, the books that are on there, the words that are in there, those people, if those words aren't read, those people are kind of lost to our world. There's another unseen voice waiting to be given a chance to be expressed. So, there's this lovely thing that, and again, times have moved on. Some books, as you and I both know, you'll read some books that are kind of turn of the previous century. So not the 2000s, but the 1900s. And sometimes the texts are a bit antiquated, and you've got to kind of persevere a bit sometimes because of having to think, well, what words are they using? What does that really mean? Because it's an older style of fashion of term. But some of the stuff that we can find out is really fascinating. We can even see how our movement has changed, and the beliefs have changed, and the understanding of psychology that's come in. And again, I always say, it's like for my students when I work with them, and especially if they tell me they're interested in physical mediumship in any way, I always tell them to watch magicians like Penn and Teller to find out what's possible from a non-spirit perspective. What could be done, like, escaping bonds, or, being, the old, what we call Victorian seance magic, so that they don't just think that everything they see, feel, or hear, when people says I'm a medium or I'm a psychic, is always necessarily what it appears to be. And that's not to cast a disparaging doubt across all mediumship, but we know that the mind is incredibly powerful, and we know that particularly, in things like seances, not everything is maybe as it appears to be, and that's a big hot topic over the last few years, as we know. And so, I'm always the kid that asks why. So when someone says to me, this can't be done, I'll go away and find out if it could be done by natural means, by mechanical human means, or whether it is only possible if there was a spirit intervention. So, you have to have the questioning mind, the querying mind. It's not necessarily the doubting mind, but it's actually saying, okay, what could this be? How could this occur? Think of people like Arthur Finlay. He came into spiritualism to disprove, and he ended up being a wholehearted believer because he couldn't explain away what he saw. When we come into this movement, we should also question and have question marks, and it's healthy to question. But hopefully that questioning should lead us to inquire and educate and read and learn. And even for the more established ones of us, sometimes we have to re-educate ourselves, relearn, or even unlearn stuff we've lost. And that should be a constant.
Yeah, definitely. I had interesting experience, old-fashioned, the old school mediums. There was always the thing that if during the service, or when they were doing their evidential mediumship, somebody got up and walked between them and the person they were working with, oh my God, all hell would break loose.
Yeah.
And not too long ago, we had a medium working. Somebody needed to go for a wee, and that's fine. That's the human body. And they walked in between and didn't. Medium didn't phase whatsoever. And I thought that is so interesting, because how much of how we react to things is because it's been bred into us.
Conditioning, yeah.
Yeah, and how much of the work that we see is on a psych, because that medium is linking with the sitter, then we're looking at the psychic reading. And the psychic reading is fine as long as we're honest about it.
Yeah. I think, I think one of the things walking in front of anyone, I think probably came back to, I'm boring him that much, he's gone. One of the things...
I've got to put the clock right, otherwise tomorrow morning could be a disaster.
One of the things, that I would never, I don't like it, not in a demonstration, but in life, if two people are talking or someone's demonstrating, I hate it if someone walks between without saying, oh, excuse me, because of manners. And I think there's a level of manners about people crossing in front anyway. But when it comes to that, there's... You know it from the trance demonstrations that we've held, and I've said this again, and we talked about trance and physical last time I think we came together, but I've demonstrated trance in churches where people have been evicted for being drunk, and I've been none the wiser. And apparently they weren't quiet little, can we get you out? It was people, I'm not none the wiser to it happening. Which shows that kind of control and blending that goes on between the medium and the spirit world, that the spirit world have everything in hand and can adjust to the needs of the individual. But I think there is a lot, if someone says, oh, this always disturbs me or this always disrupts me, that's an affirmation, and therefore you're looking to be disturbed, disrupted. If someone says, oh, well, I have to take at least half an hour before a demonstration to open up all my chakras and to align this and align that. And then you think, well, and then you see the person suddenly turn to someone and go, oh, your mother was like this. And you think, oh, hang on a minute. Where was all the opening and closing and everything else that you needed? You don't necessarily, but people get kind of indoctrinated into it works this way, or it has to work this way, or this is what you have to do to work with the spirit world. And really, when we look at a lot of the mediums of the past, a lot of the books of the past, we're talking about two worlds that interpenetrate. And as mediums, as healers as well, in fact, anyone, we walk between two worlds almost constantly, because the spirit world's around us, and we, through our mind and through our awareness, move in and out of that space. We move into these spaces where we suddenly become aware. We suddenly, we might be sitting there drifting off, looking out the window. There was a lovely post that I saw just before I came on from Simon James, who's up at the college. And there was a lovely moment. There's a picture of him looking out the window and saying, I'm aware of a presence that I haven't felt for a while, smiley face. And that's the kind of moment. We've not searched for it. We've not looked for it. But all of a sudden we become aware of the presence of the other world. We've not had to do anything apart from let the mind drift. It's as we catch those moments of quietness of the mind and the spirit will come there. So again, when we're thinking about preparing for demonstrations, preparing for readings, what we're really doing is saying we need to be a little bit more receptive, a little bit more quiet, a little bit more sensitive to the other world, rather than I've got to wait, close this, shut this, open that, do this, do that. It'd be like a person. If we were in two rooms, I wouldn't think, right, I'm going to call Lawrence in, but I've got to open my chakras, I've got to do this. I'd say, Lawrence, can you just come and have a chat for a minute? And you'd come. And that's the kind of thing, well, you might not, you might be following your cat now and going, no, too busy having a bag. But it's that moment of just the simplicity. And again, when you read and you learn and you look at some of the wonderful teachings, not only in spiritualism, but in other traditions throughout the world, you see there is a simplicity, but it's almost like we have to learn about simplicity because we are complicated little monkeys at heart. And sometimes, some of the lovely stories when we're talking about Stansted, a lot of my memories, my early days with Glyn at the college, and the stories he would tell about the people that he sat with and how things happened. And then, when I got to sit and listen to people like Eric Hatton, and we were very lucky that we had a day with myself and Glyn and Eric, and Sue Farrow brought Eric along, and there was a couple of other mediums. We were doing a little private retreat, and we spent the whole day listening to Eric and talking about when he sat with Alec Harris and what he witnessed and the things that went on. And those who had the pleasure of meeting Eric or reading his book will know that he knew spiritualism inside and out. Such an educated man, such a knowledgeable man. And these are the things that, if we want to be of service to the other world and fellow man, if we want to be of service to ourselves, then to educate and to learn and to grow is what's needed. Being able to give a message isn't going to transform our life, really.
Mm-hmm.
It might make us feel good, might give us a lift and a buzz to see that we're helping someone and supporting, but actually it's the work we do on ourselves. It's the understanding of life, the understanding of who we are and what we're dealing with and why we're going through it, that's going to transform our lives. If we end up just focusing on giving messages to other people and not focusing on us, at some point we'll hit a wall, because our stuff, our needs, our development, our growth has not been met. And therefore there will be, I don't want to make it sound dark and foreboding, there'll be consequences, but actually we must realize, like in all things in life, we have to look at the balance in our life. We have to look at taking care of ourselves. We have to look at, what's important, and not to allow any areas of our life to become overburdened with another. And again, as you said, people, spirit told me this, so I've got to do it. I haven't got a choice. We've got that personal responsibility. In all my years when I've sat in seances and with trance mediums, I've never heard the spirit world say you have to. I've always heard them say, you may want to consider, you might be, we would be interested in you looking at this, but you've got to decide. I've heard people say, mediums have told them, spirit have said you have to, and then I start to think, is that the overshadowing of the medium's mind, misinterpreting or having an opinion? Everything that we are as human beings is all potential. Whether we choose to develop it, whether we choose to follow it and nurture it and make it something special, whether it's artistic, musical, maths, science, baking, mediumship, cooking, whatever, we all have potential, but it's up to us, because it's us that's going to put in the hours. It's us that's going to put in the time. Yes, the other world are going to work with us and help us, but we've still got to do the groundwork. We've still got to put the effort in. We've still got to continuously through our life, continue to nurture that ability, that gift, whatever, however we want to describe it. So it isn't just about, I'll learn this and it's done. We're never done.
Yeah.
We're always going to develop. We're always going to need to sit. We should enjoy the act of sitting. We should enjoy aspects of sitting in circle or sitting with friends, sitting in the stillness with the spirit world. If we don't enjoy it, then that's telling us that maybe not the right time, maybe it's not the right group, maybe it's not the right person, whatever it may be, or maybe it's not for us at this moment. It's interesting how so many people get told you should be a medium, you should be a healer, you should be but there's the concern of, how do you feel about that as a statement? How do you feel? And again, if you imagine and if you imagine somebody who's never touched on spiritualism goes into a church for the first time, and they've gone in, and they might be nervous, they could be excited, but they might be nervous. A lot of people come in with a bit of trepidation, and a medium off the platform comes straight to them and say, you're going to be up here doing what I'm doing, you're a medium. For some people, the excitable lot, they'll be like, that's wonderful. For the trepidatious, it might be, well, bugger that, I'm never coming again.
Yeah.
And I know people that have been put off because people have told them that they're going to be this or they're going to be that. A bit like, you're talking about, getting one of your circle to come up and stand up on the platform and chair. Public speaking still for so many people fills them with horror and dread. But actually, the minute we walk outside of our front door, we're speaking in public.
Yeah.
The minute we chat to someone at the bus stop or chat to somebody that's behind the till, if you've got a manned till rather than a do-it-yourself, we're having a public conversation. We're talking, we're discussing, and I think people have this great fear, I'm going to stand up on stage and I'm going to make such a fool of myself. And again, that we can educate and develop the ability to be confident to stand up. That's something we can develop, we can work on. It's an inside job. So, but it's, again, is there enough motivation? Is there enough desire? Is there enough push to want to do it? Or do we stay in the comfort zone or hide in the shadows? And again, there's nothing wrong. You don't have to push yourself forward to do anything, because nobody's telling you have to. It's whether you feel that's what draws you. And again, even when you're drawn to something, life can get in the way.
Yeah.
Tonight's a great example. I've had to come online rather than be sat next to you in that room because of life getting in the way of another bit of the journey. But that's okay.
Yeah.
Fine. People go, oh well, why is spirit putting this in my pathway? How is it not just, this is what happens in life?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be blamed on the spirit world or the divine? It's life. Stuff happens to people. Stuff gets in the way. Health gets in the way. Relationships, work, money, whatever it is, gets in the way. But that's life. And that's why we need the understanding of life and spirituality. Not everything is done by spirit to teach us, punish us, or cause us a problem or benefit us. We've got to learn about life.
I've heard people say, all the work I've done for spirit and this happens to me, and why haven't they supported me? And I'm like, did the spirit world actually ask you to do all that, or did you choose to do that?
And I've had people say, all that you've gone through, and you would think after all you do for the spirit world, they'd protect you from it. And I'm saying, but why should that? Why should there be? It's life. And the things I've experienced, and I don't know about you, and I'm sure you'd say the same ones, the things you've experienced in life and you've got through and you've worked through, you often find people later on come to you who are going through that, and you can be the living example of, well, I understand it, I've been there and I've come through the other side of it. And that maybe, if we want to look for a reason in things, maybe that's the reason we've gone through. because we've got an experience that we're able to support other people with later on as part of that learning and that growth. I know a lot of although I was brought up in spiritualism, a lot of my early experiences as a young adult, starting to work on the platform when I was 17, I had a lot of nasty coming at me from people that I didn't think would ever be like that. And on so many occasions, nearly walked away from my mediumship. And then there was a part of me that went, why am I walking away from something I love because of other people?
Mm.
And it tested my mettle. But what it led me to was having an understanding and working with mediums that had been damaged by other mediums, that had been hurt by other healers or other people, because people automatically assume, just if you're in a spiritual field, you're going to be a nice person. Abilities are abilities. They're not good or bad. You can be a medium, but it doesn't mean you're going to be a nice person, because you communicate with the other world. It doesn't necessarily mean. Everybody assumes, but it doesn't mean that. Your personal nature, your personal behavior and ethics and morals and your moral compass, we would think and hope is influenced by the other world if we learn and understand about these things. And even somebody can know all the academic side of spirituality, doesn't necessarily mean they apply the spiritual nature to their everyday life or behavior. And that's something that a lot of people can't always equate. And even I, over the last couple of years, there's conversations I've heard, things I've heard people say, and I've just gone, how is this spiritual? How is this caring? How is this accepting or inclusive or whatever? And I've just been so disappointed that people maybe that stand on our stages or do healing with people can have such nasty natures or nasty opinions. And we're all allowed opinions, of course we are. But it saddens me when I think, but does that show how far someone's come in their learning or understanding that there isn't a caring or an acceptance, or even just an ability to live and let live rather than go after? And that to me shows a level of personal development that maybe hasn't been touched on or hasn't been reached.
When we see that in spiritualism, we get very outraged, don't we? The old joke about you want to find somebody unspiritual, go to a local church and things like that. But the leveler of that to me is, because we're looking at spiritualism through the eyes of a spiritualist, that's what we see. Do you not think this behaviour goes on with surgeons, with judges, with police people?
Yeah. I always say to people are people. Mediumship and healing doesn't necessarily change that, and behaviours, but it's so interesting. It's one of the things I think is that we can sort of talk about in this area is the way that the mask that we wear to the outside world, or the mask that we present in church or in workshops or courses or whatever, and certain things we say and do are not congruent with maybe who we really are. I know sometimes we have to put on a face because we might be going through it and we don't want to let other people think we're going through it. So we put on the smiley face and everything's fine. But sometimes there's a lot of stuff that, people say, do and think, and then they put the spiritual mask on to kind of go, oh, I'm a good person, really. And, and luckily, or hopefully, we're often very in tune with the fact that something isn't right with someone. We might get an inner feeling and just put us on our guard with certain people or certain situations, and just observe. Mediumship and spirituality and awareness is really about paying attention to what's going on around you, paying attention to nature, paying attention to people, pay attention to the other world, the inner world. And if we did that more, there's a lovely comment I've had to use quite a lot recently about people's behavior. Read the room. People come in and they're doing and saying stuff, and you're thinking, this is not the time. Read the room, read the energy in the room, the feeling in the room. And I see it on so many occasions. I was thinking about, because we're going to the college tomorrow, I was thinking about when we used to do the weeks at the college, and there were very long days. We used to be doing stuff from 9 till 9, so 9 in the morning till 9 at night. We then often had an optional session for some of us that wanted to sit and say thank you to the spirit world at 9:30, maybe 10 o'clock. And I can always remember watching students when break times would come up, and the medium was trying to leave the room to go and get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or to have a break, have a cigarette, whatever they did. And the amount of people that we've got all this time, we've got 5 or 6, 7 days, and they pounce at every break time to hold the medium from getting their break. So when I kind of became Glyn's gopher, I used to say to people, do you know what? When we have a break, just let Glyn leave the room first. Let him go and get a cup of tea, cup of coffee, let him go and have a cigarette, whatever he's doing. We've got plenty of time for questions. But it was the fact that people were not aware that he needed a break, or another tutor might need a break. Tomorrow when we're at the college, how we see all mediums going from one room to another room. They're here, they're doing a reading up there, they're doing a workshop there, and they will be really busy. And bless them, although they would love to talk to everyone and anyone if they could, they'll be running past. But some people, and I've seen this, they don't want to stop and talk to me then. And it's like, hang on a minute, read the room. They're running everywhere. They're really busy. It's like people come up to you just before a service is about to start. Can I talk to you about the Christmas party? Not really. Not now. Not now. We're about to do a service. Not now. Read the room.
Have you got a minute? No. Strangely enough.
But that's a skill we should have in any area of life. Pay attention to what's going on around. Pay attention to the signals of body language that other people have got. Pay attention to the moment. Is this the right moment? Is this the right time? But again, a lot of people seem not to have that. If they're fixated on it, they want to talk about it now and nothing else. And it's just like, now come on, develop that. Learn to sit, observe, or even to just say, I wanted to talk to you about, is now a good time or not?
Yeah.
And just have those moments. Again, appreciate someone else's need, someone else's time. Have you got time for a chat? Can we sit down and talk about something when you're free? When would be a good time? Rather than, Lawrence, I want to do this, that, and the other, and can you tell me about this? And can you not, is this the right time? Have you got 5 minutes? That again is about awareness of other people and awareness of the moment as well. So, that's again in mediumship and in groups, learn to read the room, learn to share in time and energy and what's appropriate and what's not so appropriate. It's all part of the learning.
Very true. And the more you learn about yourself, and especially in like those situations you were talking about when everybody pounces on the tutor, I've experienced that myself, and 9 times out of 10, actually, that person is able to work through to the answer themselves. But they've just got to this point and gone, oh no, I've got to ask you this. And then you answer it, and every answer begats another question. And
actually, yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
I thought it was that. It's about, I keep saying to people, when you're looking at a mediumship course, evidential mediumship course, it's also about self-awareness.
Yeah.
It's all about developing you. And goodness knows this world needs people now that are more in tune and in touch with things. Because we're the hands and voice and heart of the other world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're the ones who have the opportunity, because spiritualism has always been an activist movement.
Absolutely.
Very empowering. It's made people learn about themselves discuss, debate, expand their understanding, and then take that into the real world and make positive change.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
we had one of our chaps here was going up on one of the marches or something, I forget which. And he said it to me almost sheepishly. And I went, "Oh, good on you." I said, "I wish I was able. I'd come with you." And he was shocked. He went, "What?" I said, "You're the ones who got the opportunity to go and make change. Go and make change.
Absolutely.
That's what you're learning here.
Yeah.
The you, not the they or the them or the out there's. It's you. You are the one that will change that world."
Yeah. And again, even in conversation, to be able to give an opposing or a differing view and not to fall out over it.
Yes.
We can agree to disagree. And I think the problem is now that if you disagree, and again, we sort of saw this from not even before COVID. There was a big current of, you're on one side or the other with certain subjects, and and there's this whole thing about, I'm right, you're wrong, and here's the evidence, or go out and find the evidence. And it's like, actually, we can have different opinions and different experiences. The same in the teaching of mediumship. If we're teaching someone or helping to facilitate, which would be a better way of putting it, ways to work with the spirit world, we're often coming from our own experience. So it's our own belief and our own understanding. Therefore, that may not fit and suit everyone. And it may not be the way that that person works or develops, or the understanding that they have. Now, obviously, sometimes we need to unlearn myths and fears and things that are undermining. But sometimes that someone may have an experience that's very different, very unique. And we might not have come across it in that way and think, I wonder what that's about. And we might have to go away and think about it and sit with it and put it to the other world for some understanding, look a little bit into some psychology of, could there be something more neurological or physical or mental that's going on, emotional. Because again, we only know what we know from our experience. We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And, when I've said that before, people went, well, that sounds stupid. How can you not know what you know? Well, you don't know, do you? There are things that you'll have never experienced. But again, we're full of opinions when we teach about, this is how I've come to this experience. These are the things I've tried. This is the things that have happened. And again, if we're still learning and growing, there's always the chance that our opinion may change, because we may see things and witness things that makes us go, oh, that's interesting, or something that doesn't fit the rule. So we might hold a rule or an idea about something spiritually, and then there will be an exception to the rule. There will be a moment and you just go, wow, like sometimes in private sittings, something that you think you'd never ever say, you'd never ever had the experience of. And it just comes out in a private sitting. I can remember a lady that came for a sitting many, many years ago. And I said to her, oh, you've got 2 young boys living. And she said, yes. And I said, but you've Spirit also saying you've lost 2. You lost twins. And she said, yes. And I said, I don't understand why this sound is going to sound so daft. Because I said, these 2 boys, I said, you've been told before, these are your 2 boys, kind of come back. This is the second attempt. But I said, I don't understand why the spirit world are making me feel that it's so astounding that these 2 boys look alike, sound alike, and are so similar, because they're not twins. And she said, no, they're not. And she said, actually, they're not even by the same father, but they are 2 years different, but they are the same height and they look almost identical. Now, I've never had that before. I've never had it since. But at the time when it was coming out, I was like, oh, I don't know whether this, this is their second time round business. But it had been said before. And the fact that they looked the same by two different fathers and 2 years difference, just kind of was a moment that I won't forget. I may never get that again. It may never happen again ever in a demonstration or whatever. But that to me shows us that something may occur through our mediumship, through our exploration, that starts to prove the exception to a rule, or something we'd never thought of, something we'd never touched on or even believed was possible. This is where we should have that openness to question and to look and to be expanding in our mindset and not just rigid.
Yeah. I had an experience in a sitting a while back, and child gone to spirit, and as the conversation unfolded, they dropped in, but I'm going to try again. Now, to me, that was like, wow. I tend to avoid reincarnation because we are never going to strike an accord. We can debate it from now until doomsday and not make an iota of difference to either party. If you believe in reincarnation, great. If you don't believe in reincarnation, great. Yeah. That was just a fascinating, and I didn't share that in the meeting because I thought, if I share that, I'm going to implant that thought.
Yeah.
Parent, and that's not right.
No,
that's something they will discover.
I can remember one of the stories Glyn told of a lady who came to him, and I think this was abroad from what I recall, and her two daughters had been involved in a road accident, and one of the daughters had died. I think the daughter driving had died, and the other daughter survived the crash. But a medium, this lady in her grief, kept seeing her one daughter, and through her perception, felt that this daughter was saying that the other daughter had to learn about guilt by her dying, and that's why she had to die in that way. And when Glyn gave the sitting, and he didn't know this beforehand, the daughter came through and said, what my mother believes is incorrect. What my mother believes about my passing is incorrect. It was not done to teach my sister a lesson. It was not done as a way to punish. It was an unfortunate accident, and none of this belief of the guilt and the hardship and the hurt, and it was done to teach anyone a lesson, is true. And it all unfolded, and Glyn talked to this lady for a very long time, but even the spirit world was able to bring in and dismiss the incorrect belief that was being held. And trauma of any kind, the loss of losing a child must be unbearable. And okay, we can have the mediumship that says, they've survived, they're okay, they're fine in the spirit world, but it's still never going to change the sense of loss. It will change the way it's felt and it's experienced, but it's always going to be felt by that person at some level. We don't get over and get rid of grief. It just changes in the way that it affects or touches us. Whether it's learning to manage or learning to live with or learning to put it into a different perspective. So I think that as people experience things, it's so easy for us to put into the mouths of the spirit world our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our prejudices, our issues. And that's where we have to be so aware that, if we're having a sitting with someone and something comes out of the mouth of a medium, supposedly from our loved ones, but it doesn't ring true to our loved one, then we have to consider that the medium may be misinterpreting. The medium may be putting their own spin on. One of my students from years ago, her grandmother always said to her, "It doesn't matter what size you are, someone loves you for you, and never ever feel ashamed of your size or how you feel." Anyway, she went to have a sitting with a medium. And when she got to the front door, she said this medium literally looked me up and down and then took me into the room started to bring my grandmother through. And she said one of the first words out of her mouth was, well, your grandmother's saying, while you're as heavy as you are now, you'll never find a man. And I said, what did you do? And she said, I said, that's not my grandmother. I stood up and I left. And I said, well done, you. Because she said, my grandmother would never have said that. That was the medium. That was their opinion on me being a big person. You know,
I cringe, and I'll be very honest and open about this. I cringe when I see advertising for sittings and it's under the banner of guidance and advice from the other world. I just think, no, because a lot of the time that's just your opinion.
I
think how can you see that pre-sitting? Whatever comes through will come through.
Yeah.
And he was sitting the other day, and the grandmother, I'm so glad I had her as a private sitting because I could go that step further.
Yeah.
Oh boy, did she have a few things to say. And she said it very plainly and I said to the woman, are you all right with it? She just said, if you didn't say that, that wouldn't be her. And I went, okay.
Yeah.
And she really had opinions about people. I've got no knowledge of these people, so it's not my opinion. I'm sharing her opinion. But it was just so funny the way she was doing it. Just some of the things I went, oh my God, I'm blushing here, do you?
And it takes a lot to make you do that.
It does.
But you know, when you look at these things, when we sit for spirit, when we're working, this is where sometimes again people have become overly fixated on methods and techniques and ways of doing, because you know I can always remember when we used to have, okay, you got to describe the person, how old they are, how did they pass, and how did they do this, and how did they do that. And I said, if we're not careful, it becomes a CV of the dead. Here's the CV, here's all the facts, but where's the person? And if your grandmother or your mother or your partner or your child had something they really wanted to say, and you're going, yeah, but before we do that, can you just tell me where you lived? And before we do that, yes, Helena, yeah, the old days. Before, for anyone that doesn't know what CERT is, communicator, evidence, reason for coming, tying it up. It was kind of a formula for giving messages. So long as the components are there, it doesn't have to spell CERT. But I always used to think, why we're supposed to be here giving the conversation that's needed. Yes, we have to prove, but also it's not about what we want as the medium. I'm a demonstrator and I want. Right. Actually, you're the spirit world and I'm here on behalf of you. What is it you want? What is it that needs to happen here in this sitting, in this demonstration? The same with the trance demonstrations. I'm merely the conduit. I'm the mouthpiece. You're allowed to, go for it with what you want to say. It's not up to me to say, no, you can't. Yes, you can. No, you can't. I'm not there to edit. Okay, we might need to edit in a public demonstration if someone comes through who's effing and jeffing. And I've had people that have come through in the past. And I know people that are living that when they go over, the mediums are going to have to go, not that word, not that word, but they're saying they're going to have to pick out every other word. But
me already.
Yeah, we'll know if it's you. I'm hearing the word waffle. Does waffles mean anything?
I'm hearing the word, why aren't those bloody chairs straight?
And I can hear hashtag not my cat. But but again, that there is this level of kind of reminding ourselves that we're there for the spirit world. We're there for these reuniting of the spirit world. And again, you can't, you shouldn't be dictating to the other world. We can ask the other world to help us. We can ask the other world to cooperate. We can ask the other world to aid us in all manner of experiments and different ways of working. But at the end of the day, we have to come back down to, spirit friends, here I am. One who you love is here, work with me. Help me to be your voice. Help me to do the best on your behalf for your loved ones, whatever that may be. Even if we're at a workshop, that's my mindset. I'm saying to the spirit world, help me to do the best for this group of people. It's not a case of, well, here I go. I'm going to I just want to get through my notes and that's it. Every single time you work with a group of students, what you're doing changes because of the needs of the spirit sat in front of you, the spirit incarnate. We have things we want to teach, but also we can be open to the influence. Glyn and I did a course some courses up in Kent and also in Norfolk, and we actually had no syllabus. And at the beginning of the day, we would sit and move into the altered state and allow the spirit world to come through and teach and set the activity for the day. And then the rest of the day would be led in groups and working together with whatever the other world had started to bring within that time of sitting. And they were just wonderful weekends. They weren't this, by the end of the weekend, you'll this, that, and the other. It was purely, we're here to sit with spirit and see where the journey takes us. And it was a beautiful experience to have. And people were having moving experiences, powerful experiences, just by sitting and letting the other world blend with them. It wasn't even always that they were becoming trance mediums or whatever, but just the presence of the other world became so tangible. And you could feel the presence to the point where everybody in the room was so emotional because it was so tangible. And, that's the kind of thing that you can't put into words. You can't always describe. It's the presence and the power that alters you.
Yeah, very true. I often say to people, you get, who's a good medium? Well, not that Mark Stone. But anyway.
Who am I, chopped liver? I don't know.
Yeah. I always say to people, do you know what? The best evidence you will ever get is your own evidence.
Yeah.
Because that's irrefutable. Because no matter what is said, no matter what is shown to you by any other medium, you will always have that caveat of, but I heard a message being delivered to somebody who I know is grieving very much for somebody. The evidence coming through, I'm going, this is really good. This is really good. And they got right to the last line and they just said something about the funeral. And I went, that's wrong. And that person will now discount. And sure enough, well, no, it was all wrong, wasn't it? Because they said that was one line.
Yeah.
20 other lines, which I know were really good. And I'm not talking phase stuff. I'm talking about real hard work, everything. It was so good. But as he said that last line, my heart sank because I knew this person would then
discount. You see, there's a wonderful medium. Some of the people I know who are online will know Bill Forrester, who's a wonderful psychic artist. And Bill and I used to sit and chat at some of the seminars, and we'd have a drink together and a laugh. And when his wife Rose, she was there as well. And we were talking about the expectations of people. And Bill was a brilliant psychic artist. He really is. Well, he still is. Not was, is. And he was saying that he did a demonstration at I think it was at a church, and he brought through a young man, sort of only in his teens, and that he had this young man, and that he had a childhood leukemia kind of situation, and that he was drawing him wearing an American-style bomber jacket like the flight pilots used to wear, and he drew a B-52, and he literally, they had allowed him to go and sit in the cockpit. They'd given him this bomber jacket like as a Make-A-Wish thing, and the parents are taking all this, yes, And he said, and at the end of the demonstration, when they came up to take the picture, they said, "Oh, we can't take that because that's not our son. His eyebrows weren't like that.
Mm.
Everything else, but his eyebrow." And I just said, and he said, "Well, I just said no." I said, "As an artist, sometimes I can't get everything precise, and forgive me, his eyebrows weren't his eyebrows, but everything else is your son, isn't it?" Well, yes. Well, there you go.
Just had a thought saying that and comparing it to my experience, and I wonder if there is an element there of, if you get that conclusive proof of continuation of life, it actually means that they really are dead. Do you know what I mean?
But that it has to change your view of the space you're in.
Mm.
It's a very communication with the other world and grief is a very primary connection, but sometimes it isn't always. Sometimes it can become unhealthy. That there becomes, we don't want to let go. I'm going to go for another sitting and another. And it's many years ago I stopped sittings. I haven't done sittings for many years. Because I actually started to see this tidal wave of dependence and addiction to sittings, and I said, I've done sittings for 25 odd years plus, and they're not my favorite of things to do. I love teaching, I love demming, I love the trance, I love sitting and talking forever and a day about spiritual subjects, and I said, I've done what I need to do or want to do at this point in time, and I'll refer people to other people for readings. But I started to see this tidal wave of going from one medium to another medium to another medium to another. We saw it in COVID, didn't we, with people going from one Facebook demonstration to another Facebook demonstration to another Facebook demonstration, and it became this obsessive. And I can remember when you started all of this wonderful work online, and you said to people, this is because I came on and did a philosophy only service, and there were people that were coming and going, "I want a message, I need a message, can I have a message? Yes. Why isn't he giving a message? Why am I not getting a message?" And not understanding that it was, and you said it, I can't remember how many times you said it during the service and in the chat, this is a philosophy service, there's no demonstration of mediumship, it's a philosophy service. And people just kept coming and going and about it, and I thought, it's again, our movement has a very component part of demonstration, but it's not the only thing. And during COVID, my stipulation for going on to an online demonstration or service was that there had to be philosophy. I would not go and just do a demonstration online. There had to be philosophy, intuition in that service. So a divine service or a Lyceum service or a questions and answers and talk, but there had to be an educational component. That way, at least there was something more than just, I want a message, and that's all they're focused on. Expanding the mind, expanding the understanding.
There was a number of fascinating things that caught my eye during that time. And one of them, and I haven't seen it for a very long time now, sadly, because it always amused me. You would get a message from somebody, "Hi, first time here." And you just knew that 2 seconds later, anything for me. And loads of people were doing that. It was just like, where does this come from? Why has this suddenly become the norm? Sorry, I drift off tangent. Quick hello to a few people. Max, lovely Max. And he's saying about sharing your experience of almost giving up because he's often worried about being ridiculed, but that is easing a little as he matures. Yes. We don't get older, Matt. We mature. Okay.
There's
it's true. And he did a lovely thing on. He actually spoke up at Anne-Marie's gathering. So So do you.
I think your broadband's having a moment. I think I don't know.
So yeah, I was really pleased.
Yeah, but when you think about
Okay.
this being ridiculed, I think there's a great thing to realise that, and over the time, I will and won't sometimes talk about who I am and what I do. I read the room, and there are times when I think, do you know what? I don't need to. When someone asks me what I do, I can now talk about my day job, which is interesting for them. So they'll often link into all of that. Um, but sometimes then I'll talk about the spiritual stuff where I think, oh, I think here's a soul that will be quite interested in understanding this. And
Yeah.
and we talked about Glyn earlier. I met Glyn when I was about to walk away majorly from this movement, and a friend of mine, Peter Egan, down in Devon, down in Torquay, he said, I met Peter in at Paignton Church, and he said, I think you need to meet this man, Glyn Edwards, and at the Arthur Findlay College. And I had been to the Arthur Findlay College once before when I was about 18, and I hadn't met the right tutor for me, really. And it had kind of put me off going again because it was a lot of money for me back then. 230 quid was a lot of Saturday work. But Peter said, you need to meet this guy, Glyn Edwards. And anyway, I went and saw Glyn work at Axminster Awareness Centre, and I was just I found someone who was speaking the same language as I spoke, which I used to get ridiculed for by other mediums, that oh, that's not how it is, that's not how it works. And so he was the one that kind of persuaded me very much to carry on. But it's really interesting when you sort of have these moments and you realize that they're a pivotal. And it wasn't until I was at the college, I think on one of the first courses with Glyn, and I suddenly had a flashback to 6 years previously when I first went to the college. On the day I was leaving the college, after my week, which I had enjoyed, even though I'd enjoyed it with the people rather than who I'd got paired with as a tutor. And I was sat waiting to get the taxi back to the bus station. I think I'd come up by coach. And it wasn't until I was sat in the sanctuary with Glyn one day, I realised as I was sat waiting to go home, this man walked in like a whirling dervish in this Hawaiian patterned shirt. And I thought, he's an interesting chap. And hadn't paid anyone. I didn't even ask who he was because I was on the way out the door. I didn't even know. But 6 years later, I was back at the hall, sat with Glyn, because of someone else at a church down in Devon who said, you need to meet and work with this man. And, Glyn really kept my focus as to, you've got something, keep working with it. That's what, hopefully, within the work that I do now, the conversations I have, that's what I hope I can, inspire others to do, is to keep on going when maybe other people have made them feel that they don't want to carry on with it. Again, you've got choice. You've got choice, but if it means something to you, don't let other people destroy it for you.
Very true. Very true.
Keep going, Matt.
Keep going. Anyway, we're going to call this to a close because you need to get your act together, get over here, so we can get up at 4:30 in the morning, ready to welcome everybody. I'm not a morning person.
I'll be the morning person. I'll be fine.
That's fine. We'll do a deal then. You do the morning hosting, and I'll do the afternoon hosting. All right, because I really can't.
You'll be fine. And hello to everyone who's come on that we haven't said hello to as you came on. And
yeah, we get a lot of opportunity. Yeah?
No, I've been watching the comment section of lovely people commenting, which and Tessa that did Bill's workshop and things. What a lovely experience to have. And Neil's on. Hello, Neil. And everyone. And Daniela.
Good word.
Hello.
and experience. Yeah. Sorry, very quickly, you just said that magic word, experience, and this is what I push people towards, to understanding Spiritualism is something you experience.
Yeah.
And you've got to have that. Oh, Pauline, she will see us both tomorrow at the right place.
Yes, get it right.
We love you, Pauline, but please be at the right place tomorrow this time. Thank you. Anyway, everybody, have a wonderful evening. Wherever you are, the weather over here is absolutely glorious. It just suddenly warmed up again today, so hopefully it will be like that tomorrow. But in the meantime, we will see you again. You can watch the service live from Paul on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. And it's a special service because we will have the Remembrance for VE Day included in the service. And it will be myself taking that. So we can watch that 11 a.m. BST on Facebook or YouTube. And we will be back with the Lyceum back to the regular place of Saturday next week. But in the meantime, have a great weekend. And all these people in the UK, have a wonderful bank holiday weekend. Good night, everybody.
Take care. Good night. Bye.